יסעדך השם אל יעקב, ישלח לך מקודש ומציין, יסעדך, יזכור כל מלחסך, ולא עשך ידש נשא לו, ייתן לך חירוף, מלא, נענה בשביל סך השם אלינו נפגע, ומלא אלינו כל משל סך, עטו ידעת, יגשי, אדוני משיחי, יענה ומשמי קודשי, ובגורי סשע ימיני, אנחנו בשם אדוני אלוהינו נזכיר, אנחנו גם נמני סיידד, אדוני ישיע מלך יעננו ויען קראנו, and now we're going to say capital 150, we're doing tefillah, and then tzedakah, and then Torah, hallelujah, hallelujah, v'katshai, hallelujah, v'zai, hallelujah, b'greisav, hallelujah, karev kudlai, hallelujah, b'seit ha'shayfar, hallelujah, b'neva v'chinar, hallelujah, b'seif u'macha, hallelujah, b'minim v'ugav, hallelujah, b'tziltzilei shama, hallelujah, b'tziltzilei serua, Kollel neshama hallelujah, hallelujah. And if you have a pushka handy, please take some money, put it into the pushka, and we did tefillah, which is tehillim, we did Torah, we did tzedakah. Now we'll also learn Torah. We're holding here in Mesechta Megillah, Daf Hatzvi-Bais, Amud Aleph, 22a. 22, if you have a 22a1, if you have an R-scroll Gemara. We are discussing the Torah reading of ROsh Chodesh. Reb Label, Shalom Aleichem. How are you, Reb Label? Yeah, I just texted you today. I texted you a little before. I'll actually be, Mirz Hashem, going to the kever of Rafi, going to Rabbi Yassim Matz's kever. Maybe we'll talk about him at the end of the Shiur. We have a dilemma. I mean, since when does Yiddishkeit not have a dilemma? You have the Torah reading of ROsh Chodesh. You need to have 4 aliyahs, 4 people called to the Torah, each one having at least 3 psukim, 3 verses, part of their aliyah. Each one cannot begin. Each one cannot read less than 3 psukim, 3 verses into a paragraph, or 3 verses from the end of the paragraph. If it's a very short paragraph, then you can read the entire thing. So paragraph number, we have 15 verses. 4th aliyah makes the most sense to, Gemara went through the options. In order to have the 4th aliyah will be 5 psukim, an entire paragraph. Middle paragraph is 2 psukim, 2 verses. You cannot make it its own aliyah. You have to have it join with at least 3 psukim, 3 verses from the previous paragraph. So verse 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are another aliyah. 3 verses from the previous paragraph, previous parsha, and 2 more from the next parsha. Now we have 5 psukim, 5 verses to divide among 2 aliyahs. And we had 2 opinions how to do that, Rav and Shmuel. Rav says what you should do is aliyah number 1, you read verse 1, 2, 3. Aliyah number 2, you repeat 3 and 4, 5. So then you have all the aliyahs in an orderly way. Shmuel says take verse 3, divide it into 2 parts. And have half of verse 3 being part of one aliyah, half of verse 3 being part of another aliyah. And that's how Shmuel says it. Divide in half. And that way each half a pasuk, each half verse is like a full pasuk. Now we're going to delve into the opinion of Rav and Shmuel a little bit deeper. Why does Rav say to repeat a verse? Why does Shmuel say to divide a pasuk in half? A very unique chiddush. We don't see anywhere else in the Torah where we divide a pasuk in half. We read it one aliyah half a pasuk, the next aliyah the other half a pasuk. So well, let's delve and dive, make a deep dive into the Gemara. Rav Amar Doilig. Rav says you repeat a verse. My time out, right on our place. Like, why didn't Rav not agree that you read a pasuk in half? Meaning you would read, let's get this over here. Verse 3 divided in half. So says the Gemara, Hasavar, and this is what Rabbi Falminsky brought up. The one who divided the psukim, the verses, was Moshe Rabbeinu. They came from Har Sinai, from Mount Sinai. It's a holy thing. You cannot just decide to change a pasuk, change a verse, change context. That can change meaning of psukim, meaning of words. It can bring falsehoods into Torah. The division of psukim was made by Moshe, by Moses, and we cannot change that. So just because we want to make sure that every aliyah has at least 3 verses, and to fit all the different criteria, we can, and the best way of doing it, you think, is splitting verse number 3 in half? Nope, we cannot do that, because Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, did not split the verse in half. We have no right, and we cannot divide any pasuk, any verse which Moshe Rabbeinu himself did not split. And therefore, the only possibility, according to Rav, is repeat verse 3. So the first aliyah reads verses 1, 2, 3. Second aliyah reads verses 3, 4, 5. Answers the Gemara, continues the Gemara. The Gemara asks on Rav. Shmuel held that when we divide the verse into 2 parts. Really? Rab Chananya says, Kra, Rab Chananya, he was one of the Tanaim, and he was a student by a teacher with a very similar name to him. And he was a Kra. A Kra is someone who is fluent in the Torah. If he would be in Israel, he would be Chidon Tanakh. He would be the champion of the Tanakh competition. Someone who knows the entire Torah, and he knows also the taimim, the trup, the vowels of cantillation, where every pasuk, where every verse starts, where every verse stops. And Tsar Gadol Hoya Liritza Rab Chanina. And he says, I had to have a lot of great distress, great effort by Rabbi Chanina HaGadol. They're great Rabbi Chanina because they're different Rabbi Chaninas. Rabbi Chanina HaGadol, V'lo hitterli lifsek elo tinoika Shabbos Rabban. And since I a lot of times have to explain the pasuk, explain verses, I asked him for permission to, when I read a pasuk, in context, I could divide it in half. For one aliyah, the other aliyah, and he will not let me. The only time he would permit me to divide any pasuk, any verse in half, was for children learning in school. When children are learning in school, it's not always so easy to teach them a whole entire pasuk, a whole entire verse. In Baruch Hashem, when we say Tehillim, we say a pasuk at a time. When you're saying for children, you can't just say a whole verse at a time. You say a word or 2 at a time. And they repeat after you. So the only time he'd let me divide a pasuk in half was to teach children how to read the Torah. Since children need to be taught in such a manner where everything is bite size. In order for the children to understand, like it says, even by Moshe Rabbeinu, Rashi says in the Torah, even Moshe Rabbeinu, when he would teach Torah to the Jews, he would go learn from Hashem a new Torah, a new teaching of Torah from Hashem. He would teach the Jewish nation, and he would make a hefsek, a interruption between paragraph and paragraph, in order to give the Jews time to review and to contemplate and understand what Hashem, the message Hashem spoke to them. So Moshe Rabbeinu himself made divisions in the Torah. He didn't do it all at once. He divided it into psukim, into verses. He divided it into paragraphs, into parshias. So too, just like Moshe, when he taught the Jews, made different divisions in order that the Jews could understand better. When you're teaching children, you have to teach on their level. You can't talk above their level. You have to teach on their level. And therefore, only for children did Rabbi Chanina the Great allow to divide a pasuk, divide a verse in half. So if the great Rabbi Chanina, amazing Rabbi, the great Rabbi Chanina, if he would not divide a verse in half, it doesn't stand to reason that Shmuel, who came much after him, would argue on Rabbi Chanina and allow a pasuk, allow a verse to be divided in half, especially reading it in shul. Rabbi Chanina will not even allow adults who are being taught Torah, not reading as Torah reading in shul, to divide a pasuk, divide a verse. How could Shmuel come and argue and say that you're allowed to divide a pasuk in half? And so there's a Gemara, pasam taimamai mishum delay afshar. In the case of school children, what is the reason Rabbi Chanina and in turn Rabbi Chananya allowed you to teach half a verse at a time to children? Because it's impossible otherwise. Children cannot understand the entire thing at once. You could try. That's probably if you would have Einstein trying to explain his theory of relativity to third graders, they wouldn't understand what he's talking about. You have to do it into bite-sized pieces. He says we're in a situation when we're coming to the Torah reading on ROsh Chodesh, and we need to have 3 psukim per aliyah. We need to stop and start with after 3 verses into a paragraph, into a parsha, and before 3 verses at the end of a parsha. So we're stuck. We have to divide it in half. It's a case just like the school children who don't have any other choice but to divide it in half. But he says we cannot repeat. Why can't we repeat? So that we will see in the next line of Gemara. He says you are not allowed to repeat. You must divide it in half because we have no other way of reaching this, fulfilling all the criteria. Says the Gemara, Shmuel Amar. Shmuel says, Poisik. We divide verse number 3 in half. My time, what is the reason Shmuel does not hold of Rav, which Rav says, repeat verse 3. Aliyah number 1 reads verse 1, 2, 3. Aliyah number 2 reads verses 3, 4, 5. Why doesn't Shmuel agree with that and rather says Aliyah number 1 reads verses 1, 2, and half of 3? And Aliyah number 2 reads half of 3, 4, and 5. He has another very valid reason. Gzeira mishum hanichnasin umishum hayotzin. A very valid reason. This is in general something that you see between Rav and Shmuel throughout Shas. One goes according to context, and one goes according to the actual thing on the actual idea on the spot, not the context. Shmuel says, look at the context. People come to shul, they leave shul. People come, they might come late. People leave shul, they might leave shul early. This is something that is not a new phenomenon. This is a phenomenon that took place thousands of years ago as well. So therefore, he says, we might have a dilemma. Somebody comes to shul and they know the rule that you're only allowed to have you must have at least 3 psukim, 3 verses in every aliyah, and then you must have at least 3 psukim from the beginning or the end of the paragraph for every aliyah. Somebody's going to come to shul and he's going to say, he's going to be at the first aliyah, aliyah number 1, and he hears me read 3 verses, and he knows today is ROsh Chodesh, and you have 4 aliyahs, and he's going to say, how are we dividing these 4 aliyahs? It must be aliyah number 1 got verses 1, 2, 3. He knows that aliyah number 4 is going to be 11 to 15. He knows aliyah, we have number 2 and 3. Either he's going to do 4, 5, 6 as one aliyah, and then 7, 8, 9, 10 as the next aliyah, and then he's going to, a person in shul is going to infer, hey, we could make an aliyah with either 2 verses from the end, or another understanding is he knows that aliyah number 3 is going to be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then he'll infer that aliyah number 2 will be 4, 5, only 2 psukim. So if a person comes to shul late and he hears them starting from aliyah from verse number 3, he's going to say, aliyah, which aliyah they're up to? Sheni? Okay. Hey, that means aliyah number 1 was only 2 psukim. It means you're allowed to have an aliyah of 2 psukim. Or if he comes late and he heard aliyah 1, he heard verses 1, 2, 3 in aliyah number 1, and he's going to say, hey, from 4, 5, that's going to be 1 aliyah. Whether he came to shul late or early, he'll think that there's only, you're allowed to have 2 psukim, 2 verses in an aliyah. So because of that, nobody should come to mistake. You're only allowed to have 2 psukim in an aliyah, or 2 psukim for the end of a paragraph. People who come late to shul, or people who leave early from shul, because of that, they said, Shmuel said, do not repeat a pasuk, rather stop the pasuk in half. True, Moshe Rabbeinu divided the psukim, but more important than Moshe Rabbeinu dividing the psukim is someone not making a mistake in how the Torah is being read. You have to take every Jew into account, even one who's leaving shul early, even one who is coming late to shul. And therefore, you should do everything not to confuse them. Also a valid reason. The Ritva has a very fascinating outlook on this question, a very good question on this. Perhaps say something else. Maybe the first aliyah should receive psukim 1, 2, 3. Second aliyah should repeat psukim 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, or 5. And then the third aliyah goes to 6, 7, 8, 9. That way, nobody will make a mistake. Even if they leave shul, come to shul early, and leave shul, come to shul late, and they'll leave shul early, they won't come to make any mistake. Or the second one should read the first, second 2 aliyahs, and the Ritva says that we don't. There's several reasons we don't do that. One of them is tircha d'tzibura. You cannot repeat psukim needlessly in shul, because people have to go. You can't keep everyone in shul longer than necessary. And I think we might pause the Gemara over here. Today is the yahrzeit of a very special Jew. First of all, it's also my father's shloshim. It's 30 days of his passing. Many of you were joining on this Zoom last night, watching all the community in Pittsburgh got together to do v'chayit and a libay, to not to memorialize, because memorialize means that the person is no longer here, but rather to incorporate in what we could learn from my father, So today is actually I'm going to be doing an idea of Kibbud Av, of honoring my father. Sure, many of you remember. I'm going to bring this up on the screen. Could you see the pictures on the screen? Sure. Okay. I'm gonna do it again, like this. How about do it this way? Let's go back into the Zoom, do one by one. Oops, we'll do it all one by one. Many of you remember Reb Yosel Matz, Reb Yosef Matz. He was a. Could you see the? I'm not sure what could we see when not seeing. Do you see? You see this picture over here of dancing?
I could see it.
Dancing, fine. That's fine. So okay, it's working now. Baruch Hashem. Yeah, this year right over here, where the mouse is on, his name is Yosef Matz. Matz means last name Mora Tzedek. Comes from a family, illustrious lineage. He came to Pittsburgh in 1991, straight from Russia, and his mother came to Pittsburgh too. But my father got to know him very well. Who was this Yosef Matz? Many of you remember him very well. He came from a very illustrious family, the Chaim family. His uncles, his father's brother, his mother's brothers were Berke Chaim, the famous chassid, Rabbi Aaron Chaim, David Leib Chaim, Eretz Chaim, all the illustrious Chaim family all over the world. The Minklitz family are his first cousins, all the ones in Montreal and New York. Many of the Charach family, also a big Talmidei Chachamim. He's related to them in multiple ways, from his mother was a Chaim, his great-grandmother, Chaim grandmother, Peretz Chaim, his grandmother was also a Matz. Matz and Chaim married together in Russia. They were Chabad Hasidim from the very illustrious family. And although the vast majority of the Chaim family left Russia in the 1940s, they managed to escape false papers. Afterwards, in the 1970s, there were still several members of the Chaim family which left Russia in the 70s, and also still, of course, kept Yiddishkeit. But him and his family, they were in Russia all the way till the 90s. It was very uncommon for even a Jew to marry a Jew at that point. It was very uncommon, extremely uncommon, to keep Yiddishkeit kosher. And Rabbi Yosel Chaim and his mother and his father, they kept kosher their entire lives. They helped Chassidim. They were very strict in Yom Tovim, etc. There were Chassidim who were fugitives who stayed in his house. There was one of his relatives, mother and father, were both arrested by the KGB, sent to Siberia for years, and the children grew up in his house with him. One of them left Russia in the 70s, one in the 70s, one in the 90s. So this is Rabbi Yosef Matz. He came there, reinvigorated Yiddishkeit in a very strong way. Very, you could say, toughened up by all of his experiences in Russia that he had to go through. So that's him dancing with Rabbi Rosenfeld, my father, I think it's Mr. Rudolph, in 1990 or 91 at one of the Russian.
I'm not able to see.
What?
I'm not able to see. All I can see is actually just simply the tombstone.
You see
I
now?
can't see anybody. Yeah, now I can see. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. That's what I was asking. Okay, that's Rabbi Rosenfeld, my father. It's Billy Rudolph. That's Zev Rudolph. That's this is about one of the Russian programs. And unfortunately, I don't know if you remember, there was, he had a hard time walking at a certain point. About 6-7 years ago, there was a fire in his house on Motzei Shabbos, and he unfortunately passed away in the fire. And one of it was today Zayin Tevis. So can you see now the tombstone?
Yeah.
Okay. And every single year, my father would be, his own grandfather, Rabbi Yosef, his own grandfather, Rabbi Yitzchak Raskin, was not married at Kuras Yisrael, a Jewish burial. And my father was very, one of his things he would do was to any Jews who do not have people who do not have people commemorating the other side, taking care of their graves. He would literally go out of their way. Meyer Cohen, I'm sure you remember, he used to bring many years. He used to bring people, many to his grave. People with their children don't necessarily commemorate the yard side entirely. If you see, right behind Rabbi Yosel Matz is his mother, Leah Matz. It says they're Peretz Chaim from Neville. She herself was born in Neville, and she passed away in 1996 on Yud Gimel Av. So Rabbi Yosef Matz passed away on Zayin Shevat in 2016, January 16, 2016. I guess his English yard site was yesterday. So every year my father would bring people who knew him, bring a minyan Kaddish to say by his kever. He's buried in the old Lubavitch Cemetery in Pittsburgh. This is one of the Fertel boys. And right over here, I should mention, of course, because I'm going to be there today as well. This is Rafi Eshkrin, Rafal Yitzchak Ephraim, Ben Reb Aryeh Leib Shlomish Yichya Eshkrin, who's right here with us. So we today, Mitzvah Shem will take a minyan there, and we'll also say Tehillim by his kever. Is right next to Rabbi Yosel Matz. Rafi Eshkrin, just to shortly talk about him, he suffered with illnesses for many years. Always helpful. He was very computer literate, computer savvy. He helped my father all the time with computers, go out of his way. There was a Jewish expo in town. He was very helping with them. And he, went through a lot of hardships in his life, and always was besimcha. And so today we'll be by him also, Meretz Hashem. I'm just going to share a short video clip from my father talks. My father, this is from probably 3 years ago, or by Yosel Matz. We're speaking literally about today, about Zayin Tevis. So let's hear. It's very a connection of Yud Shvat. And you can say the words are very appropriate when he says Rabbi Yosef, his own name is Yosef, loved every bacher. So let me pull that up. Hold on.
Thank you.
Our Simcha. 1 second. Okay, let me just pull up this.
Connection to our rabbis, our leaders, the holy rabbis leaders. Name of the priest of Moatzis, he was born in Russia.
He was educated, keeping Torah mitzvahs and serious nefesh, with dedication, self-sacrifice. With Derech Chassidus, the way of Chassidus, Niftum with Soy Shabbos Kodesh Hatzvi-Bais, and Soy Shabbos Hatzvi-Bais passed away. Zayin Chodesh Shevat, Heitosh and Ayin Vav. The Heinish was a tool, but Chaim's and Shama should be made the Eibishter. And the Rabbi Yosef was a Yid who everything of the Rebbe was very precious to him. The Bacha was precious to him. And now for Yitzchak, which the Rebbe goes up to a higher level, takes all the Chassidim with him. So Rabbi Yosef, you should be a good better. You should daven for your family, for your children, for Label, for Gershon, and they should go in the ways of the Rebbe, and we should, the Kollel of Pittsburgh should be successful, and Mashiach should come. We brought here a class of Bachim, of Tamimim, which we know that they were very precious to you, and we all daven for you, all daven for the Neshama, and everyone will give a little tzedakah.
So today's share is also for, of course, schus of Rabbi Yosef and Yisrael Gershon, this is Shama Shav and Aliyah. And as I said, the words are very appropriate. Today is a day of Zayin Shvat, and when the Rebbe has an Aliyah, he brings all the Chassidim with him. We should all have an Aliyah together. The main thing is everyone should be back here with Mashiach. Shkoyach, thank you for joining. Really appreciate it. And Mitzvah Hashem, tomorrow we'll be back at 11 o'clock.